How does it look? And please check if people can hear me. Like, does the mic work? Do things move on the mic thing in? Or maybe someone can just join the stream real quick and just make sure. Okay. Okay, good. All right, we got it working. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's great to have you here. It's great to. I'm just like they're busy. Okay, so what I wanted to say is it's great to be here. It's great to have you here. This is our second hybrid meetup, so the second time we meet again in person. And in case you forgot or didn't know, it's Serverless Days time. Meetup edition. So this is our meetup. We do have a conference also that is on ice at the moment. But if you would like to have a conference again, feel free to join our organizer team and make it happen. So this is a community event. So the community needs to make things happen, which is good. So our meetups are usually every first Wednesday of the month. That's easy to remember. So today is the first Wednesday of the month. But we are in summer break after this one. So we're probably going to be out for about 2 months, depending on how tired we are. And then we're going to come back and we're probably going to stay on the first Wednesday of the month. So put that in your calendars. I want to say thanks to Cloud Pirates for inviting us here. And Alessandro, if you want, you can say a couple of words about Cloud Pirates. What you do.
Hi, thank you for being here. So we are a co-working space and we welcome cloud engineers, DevOps engineers, or whoever technical people. We are the home of the Dutch Kubernetes meetup, as you can tell from the t-shirt. So please join also our meetup because we are cousins, right? So there's no opposition. Yes. So back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alessandro, and thanks for inviting us here again. Right. So additionally to being here in person, we're also live streaming. Again, we're still on hybrid, and we're alternating between hybrid and online because we just think it's like online seems to be something that people really want. So yeah, if you want to join the conversation, you can either speak up here, or for the people who are watching at home, you can join the Discord, and then you can ask questions there, and we will relate them to the speakers and answer all your questions that you have. And basically, the Discord is kind of where the community lives. So yeah, join it. Also, as a house rule, we do have a code of conduct. Please familiarize yourself with it. It pretty much says be kind and thoughtful and nice to people. But yeah, we enforce the code of conduct on all platforms, including real life. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll start with Albert Jan, or Albi. We'll talk about Microsoft 365 with Azure Container Instances and Logic Apps. And then hopefully Gift will show up. Who'll talk to us about building serverless applications with Cloudflare Pages. Final slide. If you want to, as I said, want to make the conference happen again, if you want to speak at this event, if you want to organize, do anything, if you have any ideas, you can reach out to us, amsterdam@serverlessdays.io, or on Twitter, ServerlessDAMS, or Discord. And that is the last slide. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. I always forget to introduce myself. Sorry. My name is Lian. I'm a developer advocate with Loft, and we do not do serverless. We do Kubernetes. So just forget what I said. And I've kind of started. I want to say that I started this. Someone else started, and I just took over from them in 2019. So been with Serverless Days from the very, very beginning, and I would love for more people to come in because I'm tired now. But yeah, so I hope you enjoy our first talk. And Albi, would you want to come up and we cable your laptop in here? No, it's not a MacBook.
I wish.
I don't need that one, just to be sure. So let me press present mode. if that works. So is it? It's Windows, so sorry for that. Welcome. This is my first time talking about serverless, so that's going to be interesting. Don't boo me if I get it wrong. I will try to do it right. I'm a MVP. I'm coming from the Microsoft world. I've been doing M365 for, I don't know, like 16 years, so quite a while. And roughly a year ago, I did where we built a CLI, a cross-platform solution to manage your M365 environment. And when we started building that, we started considering, okay, maybe we should do things with serverless as well. So roughly a year ago, the idea started that you should be able to manage your M365 instance using a serverless solution, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Slides probably will be shared, but this is my Twitter handle, GitHub handle. I have a blog. I work at a company called Bliss Digital. We build awesome solutions like everyone else. I'm a Microsoft MVP, recently got renewed, so that's always good. But what I wanted to talk about today is first a little introduction into CLI for Microsoft 365, and then the fun part, the serverless part. Now, if you look at CLI for M365, M365 is Microsoft's productivity solution. So Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, they're all solutions to collaborate, share files, work together. And I live in that world. I've been doing that for quite a while. But the fun part about this world is that has really been Microsoft's focus for well, the last few years. But the weird thing there is that they started out on Windows, so everything was Windows. So if you were on a Mac, you couldn't manage your M365 environment. You could use the tools, so you could use Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, but you couldn't actually manage that environment. You could only use it if you would have access to PowerShell, and not everyone has access to PowerShell. So the goal that we had was to provide a cross-platform solution where you could manage your M365 services in a unified way. So the samples, the scripts should always work whether you're on a Mac, Unix, or Windows. That was the goal. And it shouldn't matter what platform or toolchain you were in, so whether you're actually working on a device or whether you wanted to do something from a release pipeline or from a function or something else that has been running in the cloud. So when we started building this, we actually said, okay, it should run on any OS. Doesn't matter what OS you run, it should run, period. It should run in any shell, whether it's PowerShell, Bash, Commander. It should have one unified login. So if you look at the M365 world nowadays, if you look at the PowerShell commandos that are out there, if you use those different modules in PowerShell, you actually have to sign in like 5 times. Each service requires you to sign in again. So we figured you should only sign in once and you should be able to manage everything. Now, what we use is we use Node.js to make sure that we can provide the CLI solution cross-platform, works on any device. We use Vorpal as a tool to actually run the command line instances to build everything. We use the Azure Active Directory to authenticate against, because obviously the Microsoft solution is using the Azure Active Directory to authenticate against. And once you're signed in, we make sure that using single sign-on, we can hop over to different services. So whether it's SharePoint, whether it's Teams, whether it's Yammer, we can talk to all those services. Now, let's do a really quick demo how that actually works. What I can do is I can open my terminal, and here I've got my terminal. What I can do is I can do the M365 status, and this is actually the CLI telling me, okay, you're signed in. So I can access my M365 environment through, say, Teams team list. They should return a bunch of teams to me, and it's going to take a second because it's querying everything and created, and I can interact with them. I could also say maybe I want to get something different, so M365 AAD O365 group, recycle bin item list. So return me all the groups that are deleted. So I get a bunch of commands that I can use. It's interactive, so I can do AAD and it will tell me, okay, what are all the commands that are part of this group? I can see, okay, I can do things with apps, I can do things with role assignments, with users. So the commands are out there. And I can also say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I can do M365 PP environment list, and then say, I want to have a different output. So I output and do it's text, I think. Let's hope that's good. No, that's not good. Let me do, is it like this? There we go. That's better. So you can see I can get both JSON, I can get the text. We also support CSV. So depending on what you're looking for, you can get the commands that you like. So this is just the out-of-the-box experience working with the CLI. And I need to sign in. There are some quirks, things that you should be aware of. But once I have it running on my laptop, I can access my 365 tenant. The cool thing about this is that as an administrator, I can now write scripts. I can write a set of commands, combine or group a set of commands and use those to manage my environment. I can get an overview of all the things that are deleted, or maybe report on things that are deleted, maybe shouldn't be deleted, and actually, well, combine different commands together and do cool stuff with that. Now, the next step where we are going through is the actual serverless part. What we also provide with the CLI is a Docker container. Now, for me, I never have done anything with Docker up until this point where I figured out, okay, maybe we should do something with it. And what we do is we provide you the CLI in a Docker container. And because it's a Docker container, then you can use it in a serverless experience. You can run Docker containers in the cloud. You can run scripts in your Docker container, and you can play around with it. The Docker container itself isn't that fancy. It's just note some requirements that we have for running the CLI and then the CLI itself, and that's all there is. But because it's a Docker container, what you then actually can do is you can say, I want to use the Docker container in Azure Container Instances, and Azure Container Instances can be orchestrated using logic apps. So what we're going to show you is a logic app that starts Azure Container Instances, make sure that we pull in that Docker container, and then we want to also make sure that there is this managed identity, because we do not want to sign in that Docker container. I mean, the Docker container isn't something that we can access. It will be spun up, it will do something for us, and then that's it. But it should pull in that managed identity. We want to make sure that that managed identity actually has access to the stuff that we need access to. And maybe you want to run specific scripts. Maybe you want to provide a set of sample script you use, or we're going to use a GitHub repo as well. That will be the moving parts that we'll play around with. Now, before we go around with that, let me show you that there is no like real magic. What I can do is I can just pull in the Docker container. I can do Docker run, and I'm going to use the interactive mode just to show you that. Well, I already pulled it, but if I do this like this, what I get is M365 status. I'm logged out. Now, all the other stuff is in there. I could log in interactively. I could walk through all the commands again, but that Docker container contains everything that I need to actually run with. Now, what I want to do is maybe I want to use this experience to provide a user, anyone within my environment, with some handy tools, some handy scripts. What I can do is I can go to portal.office.com, go to my demo tenant, hope that it's still working. So yeah, there we go. What I could do is I could say, okay, maybe I want to go to Power Automate, and Power Automate is just an end user tool that I can use. And I can say, okay, go to my flows, an overview of my flows. And what I can do is I can say, okay, I want to run that trigger logic app. I'm going to run this. And what this will do is this will do everything that I'll need it to do. It will reach out to my logic app. That logic app will then create instantiate that Azure container instance, pull everything in, run the script for me. And what then happens in the background, I will probably, wrong one, probably get an email saying something has happened. So let's have a quick look at Outlook. It's gonna, I already see that I have to pay for my mobile plan for my website, but it will show up. There will be an email telling me once it is done, okay, something has happened. Now, while this is running, I'm gonna go through all the different steps that are out there. Now, if I pick my logic app, or if I pick my flow, the flow itself isn't that fancy. It's just a button will call my logic app. The logic app is where the actual magic will happen. So let me switch to Azure. Let me pick up my logic app. And what you will see here is that it is still running. So it is started. I can open it. I can see how far it got along. There we go. So it is still running. Let me open it. There we go. But once it is finished, it will send that email to me. Now, what it actually does is, let me pick the edit button and walk you through the different steps that are out there. The first thing is there always needs to be a trigger when you run a logic app. That's like the starting point of your logic app. When does something need to happen? I currently use the HTTP request, but this could also be a timed trigger. Question? Okay, a logic app. So the question is, what is a logic app? The logic app is a well, I'm not going to say no code, a low code solution that can do two things. It can receive triggers and it can run actions. So in this case, it's a serverless experience for me, where I, as an architect or a developer, can design a process to execute several steps for me. In this case, what we'll do, anytime we get an HTTP request, we'll start this logic app. But the trigger could also be a timed trigger. Maybe I want to run it something every hour or every day. Maybe I want to have a different trigger. There can be different triggers in that experience. Then the next thing that you can do is you can add steps, or in this case, I'm going to add an action or multiple actions. And you see here that I create two actions to actually fill in a parameter or a variable. And I can say, okay, this is the container group name, and I have a container name. There's no like requirements around this. I just figured, okay, I want to do container name. I want to stamp it with a time slot, so I'm sure that whenever it gets created, it's only valid for today. I mean, I know when it's created, I can have another process clean it up. So I create some parameters. Now, then there is this action called create or update container group. And this is actually where your Azure Logic app will create a Azure container instance, pull in the Docker container, and run the Docker container with the commands that I'm specifying. So in order to do that, I always need to make sure that it runs in a subscription, it runs in a resource group that are Azure specific things, like consider it as a folder where I can store everything. Then I'll need to have a container group name. The name is what I'm going to name it. I'll need to have a location. In this case, I put it in the central US, but I could put it also in Western Europe, Northern Europe. So where will it run? Then I'll need to specify the container name. And here you see that I'll need to specify the container image. So that's the image that gets pulled in, that will be downloaded whenever I run this. I can specify CPU and I can specify memory. That's the stuff that is coming in. And those are the basic things that you'll need to figure when you spin up a container instance. Now, what I also can do is within that container instance, I then can configure several segments. So that are the settings that I'm passing on into my container. That are the settings that are passed in as Docker run. So this will be script, and I'm going to say, okay, use this mount repo demo1 script to pull in. This will actually what will be run. And I can also add an additional segment. We'll come back to this one later, what it is. But here you can just add or keep on adding different segments that I want to pass into my container. Now, scrolling all the way down, the final thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to make sure that we're pulling in a GitHub repository. So in this case, I created a CLI demo Git repository where all the sample scripts are. What this does is whenever I run this command, the Docker container will be pulled in and it will automatically mount this Git repo at a specific location. In this case, the Git repo volume will be created on my Docker container, making sure that all the steps are there. The last part is that I'll actually have a managed identity, and we'll get back to that later. But this makes sure that the Docker container that gets created and gets spun up is actually using a managed identity, so that in that Docker container, I can use that managed identity to execute commands and work with the scripts that I'm trying to do. Now, on the left, you see this little email called random input with some JSON. So apparently my Docker container spun up, it got some data, and then closed down again and sent me that email. So everything technically is working. Now, obviously, this is not really input that I can work with, but you can imagine that if it's JSON, I can transform it to anything that I like. I can write really complex script to really, really easy scripts. Going back to my designer, what we then do, we started this container. So this single command is what you'll need to create a new container group, pull in a image and run. Then the next thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to check, do a do until till it's finished. We want to make sure that we keep pulling that interaction until it is succeeded. And what I can do is I can then get the properties. So this will iterate through, it will get the properties each time right up until the time it is succeeded. You can do change limits. So I want to make sure that I don't do this more than 60 times. So I'm not ending up in an endless loop that does things forever. And what I then do is I will check if it is succeeded, if it is true, I'm going to get the logs from the container. So I get the output from the container that got spun up. I delete the container group because I no longer need it. I mean, it did run the script. I got the output that I needed. I can delete it. And then I send an email. But obviously, I can add different actions as well. Maybe I want to send a message to Slack, or maybe I want to send a message to Teams. Maybe I want to post something on Twitter. I can do that in this experience or put it into the script itself. And then if it's not finished, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait 10 seconds before pulling again, making sure that I'm not, checking like every second, because it's probably going to take roughly 10 to 20 seconds to run a script, depending on the size of the script. Now, the script that we pull in, let me get that as well. That is actually this one, the demo1 script. Let me zoom in a bit. There we go. So it's not that fancy. What we do is we do M365 login. We specify the auth type, making sure that we use a managed identity. It's called identity in this case. And we specify a username. Now, this is not really nice because now I have a username in my script. So what I want to do is I wanted to use the demo2. That's better. There I pass in the $1, which is the first parameter that I specify. So if I flip this, this sample, and I would, instead of demo1, use here demo2. Let me scroll down, demo2, and I would say save, and I would run. It will run again, and it will use that segment 3 as actual, the parameter that has been specified. So this will actually do the exact same. I will get the exact same email with the same output, because the provide with this logic app that starts up everything. So that does make my life a little easier. I'm able to work with. Now here you see, if I've just pressed the run trigger, and it's gonna show me whenever it's finished. It will show up as green, saying okay, everything went fine. Now what you will see here is if I scroll. Let me refresh. Hopefully it's still there. There it is. So here you can see that because I run the logic app, I can, or I get a container instance. And if I open the container instance, I can actually see all the containers that are in there. It's already terminated, so it will be deleted in like a few seconds. But you see it gets created, it pulls in that image. And if I go to the logs, I can see the logs here as well with the deleted team that got deleted, because I run a script to retrieve that data. Now, with that, I'm just pulling in or running a sample script. There's no magic other than that managed identity. Now, what does that managed identity do? If I go back, the managed identity, if I go this one, and I go here back, this managed identity is what the container gets as an identity to run. Now there is this interesting notation. The fun part here is if I hover over here, that there is actually a typo in this part. So the first time that I actually run this, I read the documentation, I used that, and it wasn't working. I got like a access denied. So I figured, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Turns out there is this minor typo in this sample and in the documentations. I hope they fix that soon. But yeah, you need to put in a JSON string that identifies the managed identity. Here you can see that I'm pulling in this managed identity test, and that's the identity that my container gets. Now that identity is created here as well, so I can see that managed identity. And if I go to my role assignments, there are several Azure role assignments assigned to it. I made sure that it is owner of this resource group, otherwise it cannot retrieve its own properties. I cannot get the status of the container. I cannot see whether it's terminated or finished yet. So I need to make sure that it has those permissions. And what I also need to do is I also need to go to my Azure Active Directory. And the Azure Active Directory contains a place called applications. And I can do the all applications, and I can search on, let me check what it was. It was this one. I'm going to search for it. That's quicker. Back to the managed identities. There we go. Search. And I want to search on managed entities. There we go. So what we did is in those settings of that identity, I'll need to make sure that it has the permissions that my script would need to execute. So if I say I want to retrieve all the teams or groups or sites that are deleted or are created, I'll need to make sure that I have a sites or a groups read all. So if I'm running a script that does something with users, I'll need to make sure that I can retrieve all users. If I'm having a script that does something with Yammer, or I have a script that does something else, I'll need to make sure that those permissions are part of the managed identity. Otherwise, the container will start up, the container will get the managed identity, and it cannot do part of the script that you're trying to run. So it's a bit of a tricky thing that you'll need to be aware. If you're running something in Azure, you'll need to make sure that you do have the appropriate permissions assigned to the identity you're doing stuff with. But in general, that's the gist of running samples. Now, you can also run more complex samples. So here you see this is just retrieving a bunch of Office 365 groups that are deleted. What I also can do is maybe I say, okay, I want to get all external users for a specific site. So also not really that complex, but I can run demo 3. And what we'll get is we'll get a slightly different set of output. It's the test2 logic app. And if I do edit here, what you will see is this will pull in, it's pretty much the same, but it will pull in that demo 3. It will specify a site that it will need to look at. And if I run this, you will see that that same script will be pulled in, the same container instance will be called. And within a few seconds, you will see an email coming in, and rather than delete groups, it should tell me whether there are external users for a specific site. Now, the cool thing about this is actually a sample that Microsoft does not provide. So if I create a site in Office 365, I do not get an overview of all external users that are present on my site. I can go through all the users, but I cannot filter who's external versus who's internal. So by doing this, all of a sudden, I can provide this solution to everyone in my environment, provide them with a button saying, click here to check my site. And this script will then go over their site, see who is external and who isn't, pull in the data, and make sure that they get a report with all the external users. Now, let me go back to my email. It's not there yet. Slow. That's always, ooh, there it is. So here I see all that is cool. Okay, that makes sense. Still JSON, not really a fancy look and feel, but you can consider more advanced scenarios or more complex scenarios. Now, with that, that would be pulling in the data. Now, what I also can do is I could pretty much get that same set of scripts. So here you see that I have the same script in demo 4 as in demo 3. It just pulls the site for all the external users. And then what I do is for all the external users, I pull their email address and I'm going to check against the have I been pwned database whether that external user at some point has been pwned and has a flag saying, okay, this email address has been used or has been flagged as having been pwned. I'm not sure. Do we all know the have I been pwned website? Okay, see, yeah, okay, that's good. Now, this is actually an interesting part because then I could say, okay, everyone who has been pwned gets an email saying, okay, you have access to our system, you're external, and well, at some point your account has been breached. Maybe you should consider changing your password or adding MFA to your account, making sure that, well, you're not screwing our system over by being breached at some point in time. Now, that's the Bash experience. Now, for me, the Bash experience was new. I've always been Microsoft minded. I've always been doing Microsoft World, doing PowerShell, and that all makes sense to me. Bash was kind of new, so I struggled a bit with all the greps and JQs and doing curls to getting JQ into my Docker container. So I figured, okay, maybe I want to do something with PowerShell as well. And that's the cool thing. I can also run PowerShell commands directly in my container because we pull in PowerShell core as part of our business. So what you then get is if I go to my Logic App PowerShell sample, it's pretty much the same as we've seen before. The only difference is I'll need to specify one additional parameter as part of my command. Instead of segment 1 being Bash, I can pass in segment 1 being PowerShell, PWS. I can pull in demo 5. And what this will do is if I would run this, and I will, it's going to take a second, but this will actually is a slightly more complex script. But what it will do is it will scan my environment. So it will scan the whole M365 tenant for all sites that have been renamed. In M365, you can rename a site. And if you rename a site, the URL will change. So what I get is I get a redirect site that redirects me to a new site. Now, the fun thing there is that that redirect site that stays active forever. So if I would delete my renamed site, there will be a redirect that becomes orphaned. The redirect points to nowhere, but it will stay active in my environment forever. Now, what I can do with this sample in PowerShell, and obviously you can build the exact same with Bash, but I'm a bit more confident in building PowerShell stuff, so I figured I should do it in PowerShell. But it retrieves all the redirect sites. If the redirect over it, then it will check whether a site is being redirected by running the invoke web request. And if the respond a 308, I will try to check that new URL and see if that's still existent. If that site still exists, so it's a 200, then my target location still exists. If a 404, that means that my renamed site has been deleted, and maybe I want to clean up my redirect site as well. Now, doing this, I will probably get an email. There we go. So this is just the PowerShell output, and it says, okay, target locations still exist. And then all of a sudden, the second one, this line that redirect to some rename owner of that environment or that site, telling them, hey, you renamed the site, it's no longer existent anymore. Maybe you want to delete it. Maybe you want to clean it up. Maybe you want to make sure that it's working. Now, for me, what I really liked about this experience is that I'm pretty much, well, good at writing sample scripts. I can write those sample scripts. I can run it on my own machine. But one of the things that I always struggle with when I deployed it or shared it with customers is that those customers, they don't understand what I need to install. They're like, okay, I'm trying to run the script. It's not working. Maybe I don't have permissions. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I've got outdated dependencies or something. What I can do now is I can provide this solution and I can say, okay, you get this logic app. That logic app I can share either as an ARM template, a bicep template. I can share the direct code, or I can write a script to deploy this. All I need to do is make sure that they have a identity assign this identity to this logic app, and then say, sure, go ahead, run the script as often as you want. Maybe you want to change something. Okay, you're now using this HTTP trigger. Let's do a time trigger. Run this every night to make sure that no things are renamed and no longer present every night. Maybe I don't want to get an email. Maybe I want to say, if I go here, instead of sending an email, maybe I want to search for Teams. Let's see what I can do with Teams. Loading. It's probably Microsoft Teams. Was a bit tricky. Poof, there we go. No Teams. Maybe I want to create Azure DevOps. Maybe I want to create a new work item if something is deleted, so that the development team knows, hey, something is renamed and is no longer working. Start working on it. Maybe I want to do something with Slack connector in there. Let's hope there. Yeah, there is a Slack connector. Maybe I want to post without writing too much code. I can provide this as a solution architect or developer at any customer. I can provide this set of samples and have them working with it. Now, if you look at the CLI, let me do Google CLI M365. There is this whole bunch of sample scripts for all kind of weird scenarios where I can go through if I have I want to export all my flows. Maybe I want to do something with Teams and say, let's do a list of all the Microsoft Teams owners and team members, so I can get a report of what teams are there and who has access. So I don't have to write all those samples. The community creates samples like that, and I can pick up those samples. I can use them or use them at my own peril, whether I like it or not. Now, with that, we did our demo, and there we go. Final slide, if it's working. I did share. Yes, my laptop is now crashing. Oh, there it is. So if you want to learn more about CLI, there is a link, aka.ms/CLIM365. There is a GitHub project. Everything is open source. You can check out everything. If you want to play around with the Docker container, want to either read or review this session again, there is a YouTube recording, a webinar recording, and there is actually a written out document that explains everything. With that, are there questions? Whoops, someone broke a glass. We're still alive, right? You didn't hurt yourself. Yeah, it does bring luck. Questions, remarks, things you want to see, don't want to see. Question.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. So you showed the so as well there was something developer view or something.
Yeah.
So can you also do it like code and submit it and kind of like build those apps directly in GitHub or something, Azure DevOps?
Yeah. So if you look at the Logic app itself, I can use two ways. I can use a viewer, and I always use the viewer in demoing because it's a bit more, or it's easier to understand. There's also a code view, and what you write is just JSON, and you can write a JSON either in this experience, so going to portal.azure.com, have the web interface work everything out for you, or you can use the Visual Studio Code, and there is either you write it yourself as JSON, or you use the Logic app plugin. You can deploy directly through Azure, test it locally, and see what steps are failing or what steps are working. So definitely code, you can store it in GitHub or DevOps, a DTAP environment if you would like that.
Okay, a follow-up question on that one. So if you have a more complex setup and you have, for example, like a front end and a back end applications that will kind of consume the output of the one put them like two separate apps that will kind of like one will be the tree for or one will be the input for the other one?
You could build a solution where multiple logic apps are dependent on each other. So you could have, like you said, one logic app that takes input from another logic app, from another. There will become a point where it becomes easier to split up, but technically there is no limit on how much you can link together. There are limitations depending on the service plan that you're running on. So if you're on a free model, you have like 1 minute runtime. If you're on a premium, then you're up to, I think, 4 hours. So if your process takes longer than 4 hours, you'll need to reconsider whether Logic Apps is the way forward. You might want to use an Azure function or start a function, run it for 3 hours and 30 minutes, spin it down, spin up a new one that checks how far along you are. Cool. Other questions?
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Abby. That was great.
Woohoo.
Applause for you.
Thank you.
Cool. Sorry about the class. We're gonna take a break and we'll be back at 7:30. Go grab more drinks and food. Thanks. That was fun to do. I love the live demo.
Yeah. No, I always do like that. Yeah. I try it on night
Okay. Hello, welcome back. Please, I mean, drink as much as you want. Also at home, drink as much as you want. So, we are back with our second speaker of the day, which is the wonderful Gift, which is a lovely name, by the way, who will be talking about building serverless applications with Cloudflare pages. So, without any further ado,
Thank you. Um, yeah. Well, thanks everyone. I'm really glad to be here. First time being here, so it's really nice. Like Leanne said, my name is Gift. I will be talking to you about building serverless applications with Cloudflare Pages. Just a show of hands, if anybody knows what Cloudflare Pages is or Cloudflare. One, okay. Hopefully 2 3, okay, nice. Okay, I'm happy. Hopefully by the end of the talk you would have like an overview of what Cloudflare Pages is and what you can do with it. Yeah, that's me. I work as a developer advocate at Cloudflare. Someone was just asking me what a developer advocate is, and I had to explain that in like two minutes. But yeah, my role involves me like liaising with developers and helping spread the word about Cloudflare, right? In this talk, I'm going to go over a few key things. So I'll start off with what serverless is. I would expect or I would imagine that most people know what this is. So I'll just briefly go through that. Serverless edge functions, what they are, and we'll look at a glance at Cloudflare's global network and what our offerings is, and also our developer ecosystem, which is interesting because people know Cloudflare as a security company, but we also have some products and services that can allow you build applications on the edge, right? So I'll just go over some of those services, and then finally we'll build like few demos. Hopefully the internet cooperates with me here, and yeah, that's it. So let's get started. Serverless, right? We all know that serverless actually means that there is servers, but you don't have to manage them, right? So it's like you pay providers to allow you provision servers. You don't manage them. You don't have to think about how much compute you're using. You only pay for what you use and all of that, right? What about the edge, right? The edge in this case is also serverless, right? But I would explain with this diagram what the edge is. So I like to say that the edge is servers that are geographically located across the globe, right? This is currently Cloudflare's global network, right? For every blue dot you see on the map indicates that we have a points of presence located in the location, right? The edge essentially means that there are still servers, right? But it's closer to your users, which in the end case, if you're building an application, you would want your application to be used globally, and you would also like for your users not to experience latency when they try to access your application. So the edge is essentially still serverless applications, but in this case, instead of it being in one point of presence or location, for example the US East, US West and all of that, the edge in this case is a distributed global network across the world, right? Now, let's look at a glance at Cloudflare's network. Cloudflare operates on a massive scale. We currently have 270 points of presence across the globe, spanning over different, regions in the world. And what this also means is that we have over 25 million internet properties. Like I mentioned, Cloudflare is our mission, or I don't see this part. Well, Cloudflare helps, make the internet a better place. So we've helped like dealt with 70 billion cybersecurity attacks on the internet and all of that. These are just data points about Cloudflare. So I'll move over from that and talk a bit more about our developer ecosystem, because that's the essence of this talk, to share what our offerings are in that regard, right? So we enable developers to build applications on the edge, but how do we do this, right? we have several different services that allows you to do this. The core one that most people might be familiar with is Cloudflare Workers, which is our offering for building serverless, applications on the edge. But apart from Cloudflare Workers, right, we also have something called Cloudflare Pages. Oh, I'm missing a slide here. Well, apart from Cloudflare Workers, we also have Cloudflare Pages, which is what this talk is going to be more focused on, and I'll explain what that is. But so this image you see here is divided into three. So we have the compute, which is the serverless offerings. We have workers bundled, cron triggers, workers unbound. We also have some data storage offerings. So yeah, you are building applications on the edge, but what about your data? How do you handle that, right? So we have some services to help you manage data, store data on the edge, and also some developer services like Cloudflare Pages, right? Stream and some other services you see there. Like I said, Workers is how you deploy serverless applications on the edge. So the great thing about Workers is you're not just restricted to writing your Workers in JavaScript or TypeScript. You can also write it in like C++, Rust, and that compiles to WebAssembly. And why I really like Workers in this case is how it integrates with some of our other, Cloudflare products, like Pages, for example, KV, which is our key value storage options, and other third-party API microservices. In this case, if you're thinking of building an application, you're not just locked into Cloudflare. You can also plug into other offerings, right? This is a syntax for a worker, right? It's as simple as exporting a function, and this is going to return hello worker to the browser if you run it. Moving away from Workers, because I wanted to bring up Workers here because that's what Pages functions is built on, which I'll explain now. Cloudflare Pages, that's an entirely different thing right now, but it will make sense when I tie them back together, right? Cloudflare Pages is an end-to-end deployment platform for deploying your applications, whether it's a static website, a Jamstack website, and now dynamic applications as well. So what makes Cloudflare Pages special? Why should you even bother using it? One of the reasons why I like it is the fact that it has Git integration baked in. So when you deploy your application, whether this is a JavaScript, plain JavaScript, Vue, React application to Pages, and you connect that to your GitHub repo, for every commit that you make, that triggers like a build, and then you get preview links as well, which is also something that I like. And it also has like an automatic CI/CD process where you set like a build command, and then for every commit message PRs that you create in your project, that gets triggered automatically. Yeah, I mentioned preview links. Preview links is really nice because if you're working on a team and you have a project, for example, and you deploy it, for every deploy that you create, you have a preview link, which can be very useful when you are working in a team. So before your application gets pushed to production, you have like a preview to share within the team of the changes that was made. This is really nice in that regard, like with collaborating with your teammates is really good. Unlimited staging is also something you get out of Pages. You can create several different staging environments, test, production, and all of that when you're building your application on Pages. And like another thing here is how easy it is to pull Cloudflare Pages into some of our other offerings like Cloudflare Access, SSL, and Web Analytics. Finally, this is the part I want to really talk about. Oh, there's a lag. Okay. So I've been speaking faster. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, so you can also add dynamic content using Cloudflare Workers to your Pages application. Now, when Pages was first released, like people thought it was just a platform where you upload static websites and that's it, and then you deploy it. But now you can do more than that with the addition of something called functions, right? So in your Cloudflare Pages applications, you can add a function. Essentially, under the hood, this is a worker. So this is a Cloudflare worker that you can add into your application. It's all in one place. Now, the reason why this came about is we saw a huge number of people that would have like a Pages application deployed, and they also need to do some dynamic things, right? So they also go on and have a separate Cloudflare workers project. So now they have to manage 2 different projects at the same time. But with functions, you can have all of that in one place, which is really nice. And yeah, I like to also say that it's still in beta, just so you know. This is an example of the syntax for writing a function. It's really similar to the previous one I showed you. The only difference you can see is like some, things are different. For example, with this, you export a onRequest function, and then you have a context object that gives you a lot of existing APIs in workers, right? So you can use the request the request function, or the request object rather. You have things for handling middleware like next and so on, right? Now, functions, what can you do with functions? I like to say that, thinking about some examples that I've personally seen, you can use functions to add dynamic functionalities into your application. You can also use it to store data, connect to third-party services, add authentication to your application. This is really, like, the barrier to entry is really low, because how you get started is you have a React app. You only need to add a functions directory into your application, and that functions directory indicates that those are your serverless functions. So for every JavaScript file or TypeScript file that you add into a functions repo, that becomes like an API endpoint, for example, that you can query. It becomes a worker, like I call it a small worker. So it becomes a worker that you can actually use for doing more dynamic stuff. One other thing that is an additional feature to functions is called plugins, right? So plugins are a way of extending your functions. I could see that. Plugins are also like extracting functions that you feel like, for example, authentication. You probably have different applications that you've written authentication for, and you see that you're repeating the same thing over time. You can extract that into a plugin. So plugins are npm packages, or reusable code that you can use over and over again in your functions. Just before I go further here, sorry. With functions, you have something called request handlers. I showed you an example where I said in a function, you have to export an onRequest function. But the good thing here is how you think about building APIs. You have a post request, a get request, delete, and so on. So if you want to specifically note what request handlers that you're using for your specific function, you have like all of these options to use. So you can either use onRequest post, put, patch, delete, head options, and this is an example of what that would look like, right? So, oh my God. Sorry about the delays, just everywhere. Yeah, this is an example of what that would look like. And moving on to plugins, like I was explaining earlier, plugins are like extracted functions that you can reuse in different applications. You can even make it open source for other people to also use. Examples that we've made at Cloudflare, we have like a plugin that would help you intercept HTML pages and inject third-party scripts, so anybody can actually use this, right? There are examples. There is also a plugin to validate authorization headers and store data in KV, which is a data storage option that we have, or durable objects, right? The essence is that with a plugin, you're not rewriting the code from scratch. You're just reusing it, and it's an npm package that you install in your application. There is also like plugins to help you report errors or track performance with like Google Analytics, for example. These are some of the plugins that we currently have We have one for authentication, GraphQL, Honeycomb for error tracking and all of that. Let's talk a bit about data, right? I mentioned already how you can actually build your serverless application on the edge using pages functions now. But what if you have like an application that deals with data? How do you manage that? We have several different data offerings that would help you, manage data on the edge. The one that I will be focused on is KV, where I can talk briefly about some of this. KV is a key value storage that allows you cache data on the edge, right? So you typically use this when you have data that you would read frequently from rather than write to. And there is also the cache API. This is also a similar data storage options for you to store data on. The most recent one that was just released is D1, which is a SQLite database on the edge, right? And we also have R2, which is a blob storage on the edge. All of these are storage options. Depending on the use case that you're looking for, you would find that one of them might fit your possible use case. KV is what I'll be showing in the demo, so I'll just talk briefly about it. KV is a global low latency key value data store, so you can, write limited number of times to it, but the read volumes is higher, and it's essentially makes it possible for you to build dynamic APIs and also cache data on the edge, right? Okay, it's fun part. Okay, I'm going to show you. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to show you like a few examples of some pages functions that I wrote and how these are very small use cases, right? It's not like a full-blown application, but it's just to show you examples of what you can do with functions. So let's get that. Yeah. So remember I said that if you have like an application deployed to pages, in this case, this is a Next.js app that I built, and I have it deployed to pages. Now I want to also include like a bit of dynamic functionality into it. And that's when pages functions comes into place. So here I have this functions directory. Inside here, because I want to mimic an API, I also included an API directory. So for every request that I make here, it would have like the API prefix to it, right? So the first example I'll show you, which of course is very familiar because I already showed you earlier, is a simple request that displays hello workers to your browser. So let me try running that. We also have like a CLI tooling that allows you to work with some of the developer products that I've shared here. It's called Wrangler. And with Cloudflare pages functions, you need to run, I already have Wrangler installed, so I just needed to run npx Wrangler pages dev, and now that's running. So the first example I would like to show you here is this hello workers, right? To access it in the API endpoint, remember I prefixed API and I just call that. It's very easy, right? I also have like an example to show you how redirects work, right? And this is also very similar to how you would, redirect. So for example, you have an application and you want specific users in the Netherlands to be redirected to the Netherlands website, right? And this is a function that does exactly that. So I have an onRequests function here, and for every onRequest function you create, you have a context object in there. Inside the context object, you have access to a request function, you have object, you have access to environment, and so on. Thank you. And what I'm doing here essentially is, I'll just close this. What I'm doing here essentially is inside the request, I'm trying to get the current user that's visiting this website. I'm trying to get their location, right? And with that request, I'm redirecting them to a specific URL. So in this case, I'm checking the user's country, which if it's the Netherlands, right, it should redirect them to a specific website. And if I show you what that looks like, I'll just go here, API slash, so the name of the file that I created. That does essentially what it's supposed to do, redirects me to a website, right? So if you have more complex redirect functionalities to do, and you're trying to redirect based on a user's presence, you can use the request.cf.country data that you get from your users, right? I'm just going to keep going with the examples that I have. I have another example here. This one uses the KV data storage that I mentioned earlier. Now, I'm doing something similar with redirect here, but instead I want to redirect based on the user's input. So if I enter a specific slash workers or slash Twitter, I want it to redirect me to a specific URL. And just to show you how KV works, like I mentioned, KV is like a key value data storage that helps you cache data on the edge. I am saving the actual URLs that I want to redirect to KV. And how I'm doing that is I have a redirect object with all the URLs that I would like to try to redirect them to, and I am saving that to KV. So here in this await function, I have something called env, just right here, if I can highlight it. This is essentially how you interact with data on KV. You put data to KV, you get data from KV, you list data from KV and all of that. So here I'm actually taking all this redirect and putting it to KV. And after doing that, if I go to my browser and I just put the key here, so if I say API slash KV redirect slash workers, that should, redirect me to the specific page. And bear in mind that all this data is not coming from this function because it's now stored somewhere on the edge. I can show you what that looks like. Let me see. Okay. Oops. I would imagine that I've typed this a lot for it to just suggest it, right? Nope. Interesting. Yeah, I think so. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'll just open this here. Nope. Okay. 8788. Okay. I would do this. Sorry. Nope. Slash workers. If it doesn't work, it's because I'm supposed to run something first before doing that, I think. I'm supposed to just run this first. Yeah. Yeah, it worked. Obviously, it worked. And now I have double APIs. API. Okay. Yeah, okay. Doesn't work. Interesting. So I'm supposed to do first run that endpoint, so it writes it to the KV storage. But apparently it's not working. Canary property of put. Ah. What do we do? I can just show you what I've done already, if that makes sense. This is JavaScript that I wrote, but you can use JavaScript, C++, TypeScript, Rust. Yeah. Yeah. I have the data. Yeah. So I'm supposed to write the data so it gets put into this KV entry. So, yeah. Oh my God, the demo god is not on my side today. And okay. Yeah. I will just talk through what it's supposed to do if that makes sense. The first part where I have the initial, let me just scroll up a bit. Here. Once I run this, it's supposed to write it to the KV storage so that when I try to access the URL, it then does the redirects, right? But it's not working as expected, which is sad. But I'll show you the last example that I have here, which hopefully this one works. This is, let me just expand this. Okay, it's expanded. So what I'm doing here is simple API get response to what API am I using? Rapid API. So I'm trying to get data about my current country based off of whoever is visiting. So I'm in the Netherlands, right? So the request object will return my country code to be NL. So I want to get, data about the Netherlands based off that data that I have. So I'll try to run this and see if it works. Nope. Bad luck gift. I have the API key here, which works. I'm sorry to do this, but we'll just try it, right? I'll put the API key directly here and see if that helps. Don't do this in your production code, okay? Please work. So there's actually something. Thank you. While I was in the bus coming, I did this demo in my work laptop, which is in my bag, but the battery is dead, right? So on the bus, transferred everything here, git cloned on my way, and apparently I'm missing something in the env. That's why it's not working. So yeah, at least something worked. But essentially what I have here is data about the Netherlands. And then because this is a front-end application, right, I'm now using that data in the main app, which I'll run. It's just something simple. It's running here. Sorry. And am I using an emoji? I don't think so. Okay, it's just essentially supposed to show the data that I just showed you, the Netherlands and all of that. But yeah, these are just example demos that I like to quickly show people what you can do with functions. Of course, you can go ahead and build like fully fledged applications from this. But I like to actually show people this is what you can do, right? And then you can go on to try more stuff to see how it works for you. But the great thing here is this is a front-end application. You have your serverless functions in there baked in, and then you deploy to Cloudflare pages. With that, your application is already deployed to the edge. And of course, like I said, the benefit of the edge is that with your application deployed globally, it's faster for people to access it, so low latency, and it's closest to your users, right? And I'll go back to my slides and just go over some resources that I have here. The Cloudflare developer platform is really growing. We have, of course, documentation in case you're looking to learn more about what I just shared here. We have a Discord community with a lot of developers, right? Currently, we have over 14,000 developers that are using Cloudflare's products. And if you have questions, or I'm going to answer some questions now, but if you have more questions, you can definitely ask on our Discord. So yeah, thank you. Okay, if you have questions for me, I'm happy to take them. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for the presentation. So on the testing side and on CI, do you have anything?
Yeah, interesting that you asked that. We currently have a way for you to write tests into your application. And I mentioned a tool earlier called Wrangler, which is like a CLI tool for building your workers or Cloudflare pages. So we have an integration with, in this case, in this example, I showed you a Nox application. So if you have, if you've written tests with, like, for example, Jest, that's also possible. So how I see it is, I see it like you have a fully fledged front end application, but you want to do more dynamic stuff. All the things you could do with, in this case, if you're using Nox, if you can write tests with Nox, like using view utils, for example, that works really well when you now tie in pages functions, right? So it's possible to write tests for your functions, definitely. Yeah.
And one more question: is there any sort of rollback access control, or towards the backend, like the KV store or the other stuff you have in the Cloudflare, or you
So-
have access, like read-write access to everything?
So there's some limitations with each of them. So KV store is specific for use cases where you are going to be reading a lot from rather than writing to. And there's also something that it does eventual consistency. So we have like different data storage across the world, right? You have a KV storage, you write data to it. It takes like 60 seconds for it to go through the several different data storage that we have. So imagine you're writing to that a lot. Now here it has to be doing the same thing, right? So use cases for KV storage is, I would like to say, is when you have a front end, any application in this case that you would frequently read from rather than write to. Maybe if you want to do more writing or you have a stateful application, then you go with the other products that we have called durable objects or D1, which is still new, but yeah.
No, but in the sense of I'm a developer and I have like 10 applications inside my Cloudflare account.
Yeah.
If I'm writing in one, can I need to separate my key value store, for example, or can I access all of them from all the applications? Is there any kind of like separation between them?
Yeah, so you can, how I've seen it being done is you can specify a KV storage for a specific application. So you can have multiple KV storage, right? But it's also possible to reuse the storage you have in your other applications. So for example, if you have a KV storage with some email address that you also want to reuse in another application, is also possible. All you need to do in your app is to add, so there's something called bindings with KV. So it's like an API key, right, that you use in each of the applications that you have. Yeah. Good. Okay.
I have a question
Yeah.
about server-side rendering. Is it SSR-ready solution or
Okay.
what?
That's a good question, I would say. We've had people ask about connections with server-side rendering. It's in the works, right? Off the top of my head, I think that it's something that we're currently working on for this, because functions is, I think it was released December, right? So this application that I currently have, I can as well deploy it as a server-rendered app, where I'm instead deploying it as a static generated app to get it to work. but it's something that we currently have in the backlogs. Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, thanks for presentation and the demos. Obviously, more sacrifices to the demo gods. Everyone knows
Thank
that
you.
wouldn't be a live demo if everything works perfectly.
Right.
My question is a bit related to one of the things I know about one of your competitors that has quite a nice integration that they've been working on with OpenTelemetry. So I'm wondering, all the apps that you showed, is it possible to get all of the output of the logs, like all of the things that are happening in real time or near real time? Is there like a standardized way of accessing everything that's happening and sort of being in the know of like all the monitoring and alerting needs that you might have?
Yeah, it's possible to get logs. That's what you're asking, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, logs would be the first step, but then
Mhm.
also like alerting based on what's happening and sort of telemetry data. Is it possible to get this data and put it maybe
Mhm.
inside a Elk Stack or like, I don't know, all of the other things that
Mhm.
OpenTelemetry basically offers?
yeah, I'll first answer the logs part. It's possible to get logs from your worker or functions. For example, we have integration locally. We also have integration with other toolings that are fully built for things like that, right? So, for example, off the top of my head, I can think of Sentry. I think I mentioned Pages plugins. So there is a Sentry Pages plugins that you can install in your application. And if you have a Sentry dashboard, you can connect that to get more details about your usage and all of that, right? But I like to say that we are constantly improving what we have. So we have logs, but if you'd like to see more data, you connect to another application, right? I'm curious, what competitor are you talking about?
I guess I would be Fastly in
I
that case.
see. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? No, I think we're at the end. Okay, thank you so much, Gift.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're at the end. I'm just going to put on the last slide for contributions. So as I said, we're going to go into a summer break now for 1 to 12 months, depending on how tired we are. And then we will be back with meetups, and hopefully we will be doing the conference again. So if you want to contribute in whatever way, if you want to speak, if you want to help, if you have any kind of feedback or ideas, you can talk to me now. You can email us, amsterdam@serverlessdays.io. You can hit us up on Twitter, although we might not get an immediate reply on Twitter because I've just been replying to messages from October last year. And go to Discord. Discord, definitely, we will see that. So thank you so much for coming. We will be enjoying ourselves now, I think. And yeah, see you around next time.